Welcome, everybody. We're here to start a revolution. We're here to change the way that we do transportation. We're here to start a revolution in thinking. And as I was pondering how to kick this off today, I really kept coming back to that notion. We have at Strong Towns, and I say we in the sense of the people in this room, the over 1,500 members we have across the world now, the approaching 1 million unique readers that we're going to have on our site, which is an astounding number for a person who was happy to have 5 people a day reading a few years back. We've never really asked ourselves what it was possible for us to do. We just have always focused on what needed to be done. And what needs to be done today is that we need to have a radically different conversation about how we do transportation in this country. A radically different conversation. And not a conversation about how do we get a little bit more money to do things a little bit differently. Not a conversation about how do we deploy resources in a slightly different way, but a radically new vision for how we actually deploy our limited capital, the money that we have, the resources we have, the skills and the talents and the ability that we have to actually make our city stronger, make our families better, make our communities more prosperous. So we're here today to kick that off. I want to turn on my thing so we can keep this party going. They gave me a list of things that I have to say. Kia, where are you at? So I know you're panicking because I haven't said any of these things yet. We'll do this at the top so that I don't have to end. I've got a different way I want to close this. So I want to start first by thanking Sarah Kobos. Sarah, where are you at? Is she in here? Okay, I'm going to save her thank you to the end. When we were looking at places to go for this summit, we entertained a number of different spots, but what we found here in Tulsa was not only a place that I think is worthy of exploration and worthy of our affection and our conversation, but particularly so because there's some very unique people and organizations here. And Sarah, as a longtime member of Strong Towns, as someone who has done a lot to promote our message in places, did a tremendous amount to push us to come here and then to make all of this possible. I want to say thank you to the Williams Company, not only for donating this, which is astounding. We showed up today with our nonprofit hack job of how we were going to stream this out live, and walked into this studio, and Max is now in the back with 5 different camera angles, streaming this out to the world in high def Technicolor. It's pretty amazing. So they have been extremely generous to us, not only with the facilities, but with the donation, and just very grateful. We have another long list of groups that have contributed to this, and I'm going to mention them. But before I do, I just want to say when we decided to come here, we did not expect kind of the outpouring of local support. I started getting just checks in the mail. Hey, we heard you're coming. Here's money to support this because we really want you and this message here. So the Lobeck Taylor Family Foundation, Celsi Schaefer Architects, Government and Nonprofit Consulting Services, the P. Vincent Lavoie Family Foundation, the TSET Healthy Living Program, Bama Pi, and Guernsey, all financially contributed to make this event possible. And as a small nonprofit with big dreams, that is very, very much appreciated. So thank you, yes. And I'm going to do the note part at the end, so chill out. How insane is our transportation system? How insane is it? And when I do presentations on transportation, I usually assume that the crowd is at the level of my dad, which is a very smart man, but is accepted the reality around us. I'm kind of assuming that you guys are here because you're questioning reality around you. So I'm not going to belabor kind of the front end of this conversation, but I do want to just give you kind of one of the insanity highlights. So this is Highway 91 in California. Anybody familiar with this road? It's one of the most congested roads in the country. It's It's an insane traffic snarl. We are now today spending over $1 billion of largely federal money, some state money, to add a couple more lanes to this highway. And if that just seems crazy on its face, I found this quote in the newspaper explaining this project to be illuminating. It said, the project will give some relief to drivers in the regular lanes, raising their average rush hour speed from 8 miles an hour to 9.4 miles an hour. What kind of a civilization looks at that as like a worthy endeavor, right? What kind of group of people look at that and say, that's something we want to spend $1 billion on, right? How does something like this happen? It happens because decades ago, we came up with this system of building. And at the time, we can argue whether it was needed or not, whether it was the best way to do things or not. But at the time, it was all brand new, and we just started doing this, and we saw all kinds of things happen that we saw as positive as a result. And now we are 70 years into this experiment, into this kind of new way of doing things. And what we find is that a lot of the things we enshrined in the early days now just have an inertia and a momentum of themselves. When you think of connecting two cities across a broad area with a high-speed roadway, that connection transformed those cities. Before then, you'd have winding paths in between, or maybe a train that ran intermittently. They could charge you whatever they wanted to haul your grain to market, that kind of thing. Now, all of a sudden, you had all kinds of options of where to take things, where to buy things from, how to get around, and it transformed this country in a very positive way. But what we did is we took those transformations and we enshrined them as doctrine, as gospel, as a religion. And so I'll tell you how we do this. We say this Highway 91 has 200,000 cars a day. They all save 10 seconds a day now on their trip. 10 seconds times 200,000 times 365 days a year times $25 an hour, which is the average wage of a Southern Californian plus benefits, equals a total benefit of $5 or $6 billion. So would you spend $1 billion to save $6 billion? Of course we would. What a brilliant investment. That's what gets us to this. And so a transportation revolution is literally a step back, a stop to say, okay, we've gone far enough down this path. We need a completely different path. To do that, we have to rethink some of the core assumptions of our system. The hierarchical road network is just a given. It's the way we do business today. Small little local streets and cul-de-sacs pour into collector streets pour into arterial streets, arterial pour into major arterial, into highways and interstates. We go from small to big, and we've all kind of take this for granted. If you go around the country and look at transportation plans in cities, they all start with the hierarchical road networks, the way things are done. Think about a river network where little creeks and ditches flow into streams, flow into larger brooks and small rivers. Rivers flow into major tributaries. We all intuitively understand that when we get rain out on the edge of this, if it's intense enough or persistent enough, we get what in the middle? We get flooding, right? And we're so intuitive and smart about this that what have we actually done as a public policy approach? We've gone out to the edge and we've said, look, you can't fill in that wetland. You can't run your water straight into the ditch. You can't do that. Because even though it doesn't have much impact here, cumulatively, it has a massive impact that is really, really destructive. So why, when we have a river of a different sort, right, one of concrete and asphalt, and we get rain out on the edge, why are we absolutely confounded that it leads to flooding? Why is this beyond our capabilities to grasp? And while, yes, we get a little bit of money for the stuff that we build out on the edge, we know that there's an enormous, enormous cost, because that cost is what we use to justify these insane spending projects, these huge programs that don't do very much. If we wanted to manufacture the maximum amount of congestion possible at any one time, this is the system you would use. This is how you would do it. That is why a city like Tulsa actually believes they have a congestion problem. That's why a city like mine I live in Brainerd, Minnesota, 13,500 people. If you were to go survey people, they would say, we have a massive congestion problem for 5 minutes, right? Because we take everybody who could possibly drive and we funnel them to one place at the same time every day. And so we guarantee that in every city across the country, there is a period of time where everybody is locked in congestion. This system makes no sense. And so what we have done in response is we overbuild, we overdesign. And from a strong town standpoint, because we overbuild, we make very poor use of these investments. They're very low productivity. They have very little return. If you think about it from a user standpoint, what is the downside to having excess capacity? There is none. If your road is massively over-designed and you're trying to get somewhere, what's the downside to you? No cars in your way, no congestion. There's no downside. But what's the downside to having it slightly undersized? Complete gridlock. And so what we have enshrined in our way of budgeting, in our way of prioritizing projects, in our way of design is a system that just by its default massively oversizes and overbuilds everything. This leads us to the absurd situation where during our peak period of time, if you could float up in a drone or a helicopter and look down, you would see wide swaths of our system flooded with the vast majority of stuff we built with nothing on it at all. This is not an optimized system. This is not a system that has optimized our investments in any way. This would be a system akin to the airlines saying we're going to run size our fleets for the demand we expect on Thanksgiving and Christmas, and then run empty planes the rest of the year. We would never do that. That is a crazy system. Now think for a second, how do airlines deal with this problem? By price, right? If you want to fly the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, if you want to fly the day before Christmas, you're going to pay a premium. If you're willing to fly a few days earlier or a few days later, they reduce your price quite a bit. We deal with this with price. We are incapable as a culture, as a civilization, of dealing with these in any other way than just to continue to overbuild. I'm going to give you I sometimes get stuck on this because I wonder, is this just my personal tick because I hate traffic signals? Or is this something larger? And I'll leave it to you to decide. Because I think traffic signals are the byproduct of just idiocy incarnate. It's like we came up with a really simple solution to a really complex problem way back when, and then we enshrined it and just continue to do it over and over. The idea of traffic signals is if we didn't have them, we would all kill each other, right? We'd all run into each other, and we'd have chaos and mayhem. And I was in Kansas City, and I pointed out to the people in Kansas City that they would see a lot more success in their downtown if they actually created some edge frictions, lowered the travel speeds, slowed things down, and then got rid of their traffic signals. And the outcry was enormous. Chuck, you're insane. You're crazy. It would be a snarled up mess. Nobody would get anywhere. So I pointed out to them that I stayed at the hotel here and I had to drive out to the airport. It was a 23-minute drive on Google. It's Google told me. Of that 23 minutes, the first 3,700 feet, so 3/4 of a mile roughly, was going to be in the downtown. And I was going to go through 10 traffic signals on the way out, right? Just like I would if I was traveling through downtown Tulsa. Your travel time is highly dependent on how many signals you hit. So if you don't hit very many, you can get out of town pretty quickly. But as soon as you start to hit 1 or 2, and of course, how many are you going to hit? 8, 9, right? Your travel time just goes through the roof because you're sitting there going 0 miles an hour. Now imagine instead that we lowered speeds to 15, a speed that would be absurdly slow by like our cultural expectations today, but a speed that would be safe for people, would allow people to essentially cross the street anywhere, would allow people to bike in traffic in a way that would be safe. Kids, older people, a whole broad range of humanity would be able to participate in what goes on in street life. Imagine we were lower speeds to 15 miles an hour, something absolutely radical and unthinkable. Well, to go that same distance, get rid of the signals, because now you don't need them, you just flow through the intersections, you can get out of town far, far more quickly. We can do way more with less. We can be way smarter and get far better results. We can actually get places more quickly if willing to drive slower. This is a revolution. This is a different way of thinking about how we mobilize our resources. I want you all to laugh at my county commissioner. When we built our first roundabout in my hometown, this is what he said. He said, being a good American and thinking we fought a war with Europe over some things, this is one of those things that seems to me to be European. You know, and you're laughing because there's someone in your community who thinks the same thing, right? And they're on the city council. Yep. You know, forget history. Like, you know, half of Europe was our allies. Just dumb. The idea that we would want to spend more on signals to sit in traffic and go zero is just an insane byproduct of a system that we haven't really stopped to think much about in decades. The notion of forgiving design is another one of these things embedded in the way we go about things today. Forgiving design is very simple, and it came about for very logical reasons. When we first built the highways in this country, the fatality rates were through the roof. They were insane, because the way we went out and built them was we took the cart paths through the woods and then we paved them with high performance surfaces. And if you think of a cart path, when you're riding through, when you're building a cart path and you come across a huge tree, what did you do? You just went around it. When you came to a big rock, you would just go around it. Well, when you go through and put high performance pavement and high performance vehicles on it, and you hit that tree, people were going off the road and being killed. You can look at like the early photos of the highways, and they did this. They were crazy. You look at them today and say, this is insane. And so what we did is we said, we can, as engineers, look at this system and design it to better serve people. We can do things like put in wider lanes so that if people tend to drift a little bit or lose control, they've got some recovery room. We could put in extra width on the shoulders so that if people wind up going off, they've got some space to recover, get back on. We can get rid of these, you know, obstacles on the side. So if we do go off, we're not hitting things. And, you know, when a tree goes zero and the car goes 60, that doesn't work well when you go off the road, right? So we can do these things. And this is the way we build highways today. And it's brilliant. Like, we've saved an untold number of lives. The problem with this is that we took this thinking and we said, if it works out there, it will work in here. If it works on the open road, it will work in our cities. And of course, cities don't work this way, right? We can go look at the street out in front of this building, and what do we see? 4 highway scaled lanes. That's insane. Empty, yes. But just the fact that when you go up to an empty street on 4 lanes, you're still nervous about crossing because you know whatever car comes through is going to be coming at really high speeds, tells you that this kind of thinking does not apply to our cities. This type of thinking does not apply. We have a saying at Strong Towns, if you need a sign to tell people to slow down, you designed your street wrong. Streets should intuitively communicate to the driver the safe speed at which they can drive. We have spent so much time trying to forgive the mistakes of drivers that we have ignored the mistakes of other humanity that exists within our streets. And those are the mistakes we need to start forgiving. Engineers love to put together, and by the way, I've been up here like seemingly bashing engineers. Well, I is one. So just for those, I realize there's some people here who maybe didn't know that. I worked as a licensed engineer. I still am, but worked for many years doing engineering projects. One of the things that we like to put in like our design manuals are little things like this, where we say, all right, you can have your arterial roads with a lot of mobility. You can have your local roads with a lot of access, fast, get someplace, slow, be in a place. Or you can have this magic thing in the middle called a collector, where you can both be in a place and get someplace, right? You can have like your cake and eat it too. We point out that these are really, very cost-effective investments. But when we get in the middle here, You have investments that are extremely costly and very low productivity. Also, these are very safe when you're going very fast, but there's not a lot of access. It's very safe to travel. When you're going really, really slow and there's a lot of chaos, you might get a fender bender, but you're not going to kill anybody. It's this part in the middle where you've got fast speeds with complexity that you get tragedy. When you mix fast speeds with complexity, you get tragedy. What we envision at Strong Towns, what we see is taking that chart and kind of flipping it on its side and saying, all right, at what speed do we create the most value? And what we find is that we create the most value for society when we are traveling at very low speeds and at very high speeds. But all that stuff in the middle are really, really poor investments. All this stuff in the middle, what we call a strode, are really dangerous, very expensive, and very unproductive. This is our classic image of a strode. A strode is the futon of transportation. If you think of a futon as being an uncomfortable couch that makes into an uncomfortable bed, a strode tries to do two things at once and does neither of them well. It tries to be both street and road. And this is really important for the conversation we're going to have here over the next day and a half. Strodes try to do two things at once and fail. They try to be road and street. The difference, roads are about moving people places. If you think of a railroad as a replacement, the road is a replacement of the railroad, a road on rails. You got on at one spot, you got off on another, and there's a high-speed connection between the two. If you look at this system, we make wide lanes, we try to move cars very quickly, but nobody gets to move quickly here, right? Because we've got signals that make you go zero, we have low traffic speeds, and so even though we're making this massive investment in moving cars quickly, nobody here moves quickly. It fails as a road. What is a street? This is really, really important. A street is, and always has been from the earliest days of when we started to build cities, a street is a platform for building wealth. And when we talk about wealth, we can measure this. My friend Josh is over here, has done an amazing job measuring this in dollars and cents. That's often a reflection of a deeper set of wealth and understanding community capital, social capital, the places we live in, the places we value. A platform for building wealth. And if we look at this, on this strode, we've made investments to try to build wealth, right? We've made wide sidewalks. We put in decorative lights. We hang out banners and put out, benches and planters at different times of the year. Is this street building a lot of wealth? Is it creating a lot of tax base? No, it's not. Because everybody who comes here comes by auto, they leave by auto, and they actually go from one business to the other by car. It's not a platform for building wealth. The conversation that we need to have in this country is about how we take this massive amount of strodes that we have built, and really the ubiquitous landscape of America is the strode. This is what our largest transportation investment has been certainly over the last 3 or 4 decades. How we take our strodes and make them into wealth-producing streets and highly productive connections between places. From an engineering standpoint, this is really simple to do. The problem with doing this has nothing to do with engineering or design. And it has everything to do with culture and our expectations and where we place our values. Let me show you how simple this is to do. We can go from strode to street by doing just a few things. We slow traffic. We prioritize people over automobiles. We intensify the adjacent land use. We actually allow the land use to build wealth. We allow things to grow adjacent to the street. We encourage that. And we understand that these places are highly complex. And we actually embrace that complexity. We allow that complexity to actually dictate to us the next steps that we should take along that street. To go the other way from strode to road is also very simple. In this situation, we're trying to speed up traffic. The way we speed up traffic is by removing intersections, removing access, making the traffic, allowing it to flow more smoothly. We eliminate automobiles from other modes of travel. So if you want to bike, if you want to walk, that's a separate piece of infrastructure. It is not safe to have people walking alongside of roads 5 feet from a car going 60 miles an hour. There's no condition under which that is safe in any way. We do not allow the land use to degrade the capacity. We don't allow the big box store to come in and say, you know what, you've got really high traffic counts, so we would like to kind of mine that investment that you've made and suck some of those cars off. And yes, we'll create congestion there, but we'll get all kinds of economic development. Those are very, very low returning investments that are made on the backs of billions of dollars of infrastructure investment that we collectively have made. And we need to simplify. These things should be done very simple and easy, as opposed to the complexity that we see over here. Roads are so simple, they almost defy our ability to even explain them, right? We've got two places, we're connecting those places with the roadway, we get flow in between. When the places grow and are prosperous because of this connection, we get additional flow. We can then increase the capacity of our roadway. We can add different ways of getting between places. As that continues to expand, we can increase the intensity of our travel back and forth. We have all kinds of options when we actually build great roads for making really productive use of them in a very cost-effective manner. We know how to do this, we really do. It's a cultural and a short-term kind of economic expectation that has us do things differently. Where we struggle, and I think where we have the most work to do intellectually, is when it comes to streets. How we take our roads and convert them into wealth-producing, productive streets. At Strong Towns, we like to say that this is more of an art than a science. In fact, it really isn't a science. And when we treat it like a science, we do a massive disservice to our communities. I had a colleague, an engineer, email me this week, lamenting an article that I had written titled, "Engineers Should Not Design Streets." And the thrust of the article was that when we go to a code book and look and say, okay, here's what the manual says this street should be, without going out and actually understanding what's going on that street, who the people are, what their business aspirations are, what their aspirations for their neighborhood is, how they look and perceive their place, what the value equation is there, how that road's going to be paid for and maintained. If we have an absence of that, but we just take the answer out of a manual, we're completely missing the art of building great, productive, wealth-producing streets. If we look historically at places, what we see is that streets are a complex undertaking. They're not built and then become static. They're not built and then become places that are done, that are completed, that we just walk away from. Historically, cities and streets have been built like this. They start as little small investments. Over time, those investments are torn down and replaced with something more substantial. Over time, those are replaced with something more substantial. And you actually see communities that can go from little tiny pop-up shacks to Manhattan over the course of a century or more by small little incremental investments. Our streets cannot come from a manual. They actually have to adapt to that increasing intensity over time. It has to be something that we collectively build, not that is given to us by a series of professionals. I know a lot of my friends here in this room have seen this, but for the people that have not, I think it's an important thing to take away to kind of understand the implications of this. Two identical blocks in my hometown, one designed in that old incremental way and one designed in our new kind of auto-oriented way. When we look at these, we can see that visually they have a different kind of way of expressing themselves. One looks like blight, one looks like prosperity, at least in the modern sense that we think of it. But when we actually look at the tax base and the wealth that is created in these places, what we see is a massive disparity. What we see is that as we have turned our streets away from being about building wealth and turned them into things that engineers design and build, that planners design and build, that we pull out of a manual that tells us what to do, what we see is that we continually devalue our places. We continually take our tax base and our wealth and denude it further and further. And over time, this is not a situation that holds up well. We see this in all kinds of frameworks wherever we look at it. We have 19 acres on the edge of town, 19 acres in the center of town. This is the most valuable piece of property out on the edge. Wealth is absolutely dwarfed by the rundown, neglected parts of the city. When we build incrementally, when we start with the building and then follow with the street, what we find is that we can create immense amounts of wealth that is enduring, wealth that will carry us through good times and bad times. My good friend over here, Josh, and Kate are with a group called Urban 3. They put together modeling of cities around the country. It's amazing, amazing stuff. I love to show 3 of their maps here because they illustrate this value equation. This is Buffalo, New York. What I'm going to show you in the 3rd dimension is value per acre. Where are the most financially productive parts of the city? If you think about Buffalo, it's a place that has seen huge amounts of disinvestment, declining population every decade since World War II. Yet when we say, where's the wealth in Buffalo? Where's the enduring value that is sustaining this city? Can you point to the traditional downtown? Can you point to the parts of town that were built over 100 years ago, slowly and incrementally? There's still a massive store of wealth and value. We see this in cities of all sizes. Here's another one of about 60,000. Here's a small little one where I live, about 1,200. We see the same exact thing. The neighborhoods that are actually in decline but are built in a traditional way have enormous value, while the other ones that we have built in our new style really, really struggle. This is for a very simple reason. And it's a simple reason to understand. When we look at places that are financially thriving, when we model cities around the country and ask ourselves, what are the neighborhoods that are cash flow positive? What are the neighborhoods that actually pay and sustain themselves? They all have one thing in common. Everywhere where we go, where we can see these types of neighborhoods, they have one distinct characteristic, one thing that we find in all of them. What is it? It's people. People are the indicator species of success. If you're trying to figure out if your place is working or not, the question you need to ask yourself is, are people present? Do we see them out in this habitat? Do we see them moving around? Do we see them existing in these places? And if they are, you're doing something right. If they're not, you need to rethink your approach. When we're talking about building successful streets, we need to talk about building places for people. As a final thought here, I want to walk you through and help you kind of contextualize that this revolution in transportation is an audacious suggestion, but yet it's one that I think we have a broad public acceptance for. When we look at the way the engineering profession approaches building transportation infrastructure today, there's a set of values that we bring to the conversation. We don't call them values, we just call them the design process, but the design process embodies a set of values. The first value we provide as engineers is we ask, what is the design speed for this area that we're building? Then we say, what's the volume of traffic we're expected to handle? We then say, based on that speed and that volume, what does the manual say is a safe way to build this? And once we have that, how much is it going to cost? These are the values of the engineering profession. Let me ask you this now. In our room today, my fellow revolutionaries who kind of help, transform this country and change our conversation. If you were to think about the streets in your place, the streets where you live, the streets where you work, the streets where you would take friends who would come to visit, which of these values is most important to you? I want you to shout this out. I'm going to ask you, is it moving cars at speed? Is it handling a set volume of cars? Is it ensuring that our investments provide a level of safety? Or is it the cost effectiveness? If you had to say, would it be speed, volume, safety, or cost? All right. What would be your second priority? Would it be moving cars at speed, moving a set volume of cars, or would it be that our investments are cost effective? Would you prioritize speed, volume, or cost? If you had to choose between speed and volume, we can move a set volume of cars, or we can move cars at speed. Would you choose speed or would you choose volume? I can't change these. Do you see what we just did? Do you see what we did? And I've done this with thousands of people across the country, and I get the same results every time. We have inverted the values that are applied to building our places. We understand the values that should be applied. We understand that speed is a far lower priority than safety on our streets. We understand that this change needs to happen. All we have to do is stop being timid about demanding it, because society is actually with us. If you think about complete streets, which is really a response to a despotic way of building places, this complete streets movement has really done a lot to raise awareness that there are other people besides cars on our street. I like to call this the separate but equal approach. It's a very American way of thinking of solving a difficult problem, right? We'll just give everybody their own space. This is what a very rich, affluent country does, right? No, we don't have to compromise anything. We'll just give bikes a place, people walking a place, people driving a place, transit a place. Everybody gets, Oprah. Everybody gets a car, right? Here's the change in thinking that we as a movement need to embody. Complete streets accommodate pedestrians in an auto-dominated environment. Strong towns accommodate automobiles in an environment dominated by people. It's people that make places successful. It's people that build wealth. It's people that fall in love and invest in businesses and raise families and volunteer for the PTA. It's people that make things happen. And if we want successful places, if we want strong cities, towns, and neighborhoods, we have to make our streets first and foremost about people. E.F. Schumacher said that any intelligent fool can make things bigger, more complex, and more violent. But it takes a touch of genius and a lot of courage to move in the opposite direction. We have convened this summit here in Tulsa to tap into that genius and also to tap into that courage that all of you have, to take a radically new vision for how we can build successful, strong, prosperous cities and have that grow into a successful, prosperous, strong America. So thank you, everybody, for being here today and being part of this. I'm deeply honored by all the people who have shown up, and I look forward to doing a lot of good work today. So thank you.